It's
I feel like I need to defend my scene's honor here, because this is just turning into a bit of a dog battle.
like in groups always look.
I'm
TSM,
cutting
they
you
always
off
look
here. I'm cutting you
lackluster.
off. Cutting you off. He said G2's winning it. He said G2's winning it.
We need to wait till the next EU tournament, which could be in about 10 years now.
Take it with like a grain of salt.
No,
but
that's
that
no
being
fun.
said,
Take it super literally.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Press 4 to Defuse, your weekly source for Valorant esports news and discussion. And we got a lot to talk about this week. I'm Darth Mike, joined as always by the wonderful crew of Sam and Ryan. Ryan, I need to slide you slightly further over. You did the thing where you escape on me.
I didn't move. I did not move.
You say that, but you lie.
You can't prove it.
It's a lie.
you know what? He said this to me once before as well, where I was out of frame, and he was like, "You moved." I think he just does something wrong and then blames us.
You guys just don't have your marks. You got to do the thing where you put like one piece of tape so that you know your camera position and just always be centered on that.
It's always
that
difficult when you've
what if
got
you,
an
like,
angled
move?
camera.
That's the thing. That's why you have the one piece of tape, so you know your camera lineup. It's like when you're in a studio and you're on the desk and you need to know exactly what the spacing is from.
Have we
Chromecasting.
digressed before the episode even started?
We have. We've gone off of it, but we need to get back on it because we've got a bunch of Valorant stuff to talk about, exciting things to talk about. So we're gonna go ahead and get on into them. I hope you guys all enjoyed that quick tangent. We definitely don't do those in this show. Never. Yeah, all right, we got a lot of stuff going on. First, I'll just get a quick temperature check. How are we feeling after this weekend? Everyone feeling good?
All good, all good. Good on my end.
Yeah.
Plenty of stuff coming out. So yeah, and a great tournament, and also more on Nerd Street Gamers. Like holy crap, we're doing the Challengers qualifiers, so that's pretty
Oh
cool.
my god, it's so
That's
exciting.
super exciting. We're gonna talk about that a little bit later on, but that is huge. That's I mean, look, let's all just be honest here. No bias here. Nerd Street Gamers production. Everybody else in North America. You want to talk
Everybody
world?
else,
Like
period.
Blast is closer, but like, come on, Nerd Street Gamers. Everybody else. It is what it is.
I don't think this was like particularly surprising for anyone. Like we saw it, we were just like, "Oh, that makes sense."
It was encouraging, right? It was encouraging because sometimes you do see companies make boneheaded decisions about who they give contracts to. But so far, Riot has appeared to make relatively good decisions. But let's talk about some non-Riot related decisions. Let's talk about what's been going on this past week. We're just going to run it back here, where we're going to recap some of the moves that happened in this past week and break them down for you. The first one is some movement with Guild. I think we kind of had talked about this being a possibility, at least with regards to Safe being signed. But we've got two new signings for Guild. Safe coming in as their fifth, and then Barbar coming in as their coach, which I'm kind of excited about, and I'd wager neither of you have ever heard of Barbar.
He actually
I
played for a
definitely
couple of
haven't.
teams in Europe.
Did he?
I can't. Yeah. He played on like various rosters with like some of the guys from Guild and stuff. Like pretty much Swedish stacks. So it was pretty short-lived. I think the teams that he was on, I think it was those guys. I'm not 100% sure, but like he was part of a roster that did relatively well. Now that was a Polish team that Zeke was on. I'll get the team that he's on in a second, but yeah, he's coming in as Dream Chasers. That's it. It had a team with players called Emilio was on there, Cobra, and a guy called Kicker. It was just all Swedish team.
Like you're just the European esports historian at this point.
No, just
Like
for
we'll be sitting
Counter-Strike.
here going, "Who the hell is that?" And Ryan's like, "Oh yeah, let me tell you about that guy." So and you just give like his whole life history, and we're just like, "Okay, cool."
It's
I
good.
need to
Good
get
to
the
know that there's someone
Parker
here
and
that
just
knows
do
what's
my
going
best
on.
foreign impression.
It's good though, because we've got Ryan, who knows
What is
everybody
a
who's been on
foreign
any
expression?
EU roster in Valorant, and then I know where they came from in Counter-Strike. So between the two of us, we can paint a whole forensic picture. Because Barbar was one of
Yes.
those players who competed on sub-top Swedish rosters for a long time. He played on a bunch of different rosters, played with a bunch of different players, and he was always really fun to watch. He was one of those guys who they'd get into one tournament that was like above their level of what they would be expected to play at, and he'd pop off and he'd go big and he'd be fun to watch on the cams or on the stage or whatever it was. So I always have had good feelings about Barbar. I do also want to point out, I'm just going to pull it up again. The announcement, whoever their social media person is, I don't think this was intentional. It looks like they just announced one person named Sabar. And they then made a meme joking about it afterwards where they're like, Team Lightsaber. to try and recover because the two photos just cropped perfectly to make it look like one
Oh
announcement.
yeah.
Actually amazing.
Gotta be.
What if
gotta
that
be
was on
careful.
purpose though? Like if that was on purpose, that's just on a whole nother level.
That's genius. I don't think
Actually,
it was.
you know, like what we did with like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and it was like Brangelina or whatever. So it's Sabar, and now it's like because we saw Guild's very first roster announcement. They are super creative with stuff like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was all done on purpose.
Whoever's doing their announcements and their SoMe definitely is doing a good job of it so far. But what do we make of this roster? Do we think that this Guild team's going to be a threat now? Because they were really disappointing, to be quite frank, in the previous outings. Ryan, you want to start us out here?
This is easily could be a top 5 team. I think just the fact that it brings in Safe makes it surpass the likes of Team Liquid, the new Giants team.
Okay.
I think that it's on par with Heretics in all honesty. And I think that when it comes to this team, they had to have this roster move. I think it was the only one that would make sense. Everything else, and you will see this old Bonk team start to slide because it is Safe coming back to his old team of the unsigned Bonk days, and Bonk were a really good roster sort of within that region. It's very much on level to Heretics and Summon, I think, at this point. The only teams that I personally think are better just on the face of it, at least, before we go into actual games and official matchups are G2, FPX, and probably Heretics then at that point. So I think that it could be a top 3 team.
Okay.
I genuinely think, but it really does depend on if they can find that form that they had before, and if Safe can be good, because I don't think he was particularly on Ninjas in Pajamas.
Sam?
Glad you said that because I've been kind of feeling the same way. You guys know, for as long as we've been doing this podcast and further back, I have always been a Bonk stan. Every time Mike asked who's gonna beat G2, I'd be like, it's gonna be Bonk. It's gonna happen. And they did, to be fair. The one time they did, it got overturned, but it did happen.
Okay.
And I feel like this is a team, I've always supported them because I've always seen that potential. Individually, each of these players is really, really good. They lost Safe, and he didn't perform as well on Ninjas in Pajamas, but I feel like there's more to it. Like, you don't just go from being a player who was regarded as one of the best Viper Sova players in the region to just, like, underperforming just because you swap teams. I mean, there's always something else that's going on behind the scenes, whether it's communication between the players or like a mismatch in terms of your play style or what you want to be doing, what you're trying to be achieving. There's always something else that goes into it. And I think coming back to the Guild is a good move for both the Guild roster and for Safe. And if they can just... I can't get off this bandwagon. I've been on it for far too long now. I gotta, like, hold my ground. There's so much potential there, and if they can find a way to harness the power, they would become the Thanos, the Infinity Gauntlet of Valorant.
Okay,
that's my hot take.
So, okay, you're both very positive on this roster. We've got Ryan saying they're top 4, possibly top 3. We've got Sam saying they're gonna Thanos snap half of the Valorant universe out of existence. I mean, this
if
is
they
this
can
is
get
heated.
good.
If they
get good. If they continue on their current trajectory, they're just gonna, like, plummet into complete obscurity.
Cutting edge analysis here. If the players can get good, the team will also be good.
The players are good. The team needs to get good as a unit.
Okay.
See, this is the thing.
Okay. Hot take here. If they're good, they will be good. I agree with you on that.
Shut up, Mike.
I think that is accurate.
There's so many, like, question marks though. Every player to an extent could be an absolute shining light for the team, but there are some as well, like Bonker, the IGL, the silver player, that just stats wise doesn't keep up with anybody else. It's the typical European IGL story where they are the one that typically bottom frags, and they are excused for it because they're doing the calling. I think that's fine if you are an Omen IGL or even like a Sentinel IGL, but if you're playing Silver and you're not really performing, it really does depend on your scene, Safe and like Leo. All of them have been switching around. Draken was a recent addition to the roster, has had a lot of experience within Valorant at this point, and none of it particularly has been super standout and super strong. Yeah. So really you're looking for Safe to come in and find that form that he had before that we never really saw come to life in Ninjas in Pajamas. You're expecting your seed to keep up with all of the other fast improving raises within the region. Bonka needs to just get better in the server and like hope that he can rely on his IGLs to do some of the heavy lifting, which is hard at the moment. And then Leo is another one of those up and coming talents. Was possibly one of the best omens coming in Europe. He's only like 17,
Yeah.
but then he's also been playing Breach and stuff. So really, if I'm looking at them, you want Safe to play an entry character like Phoenix, maybe even Jet, depending if that's in his hero pool. Have you seen on the race Bonker on the Sova, and then the sort of backbone of this team? It's hard because they've dropped Goffy, and it just feels like they need to find some semblance of what their comp wants to be. Because if they don't, you've got another like Ninjas in Pajamas on your hands where they've got really good players, but they just don't click and it doesn't work out.
Okay, so there's a little temperance for our hype train that we had going here. Still, I think it's good to be excited. We'll go ahead and move on to our next topic. This next one shouldn't take long, purely because I think we've kind of exhausted the conversation at this point. It's the official announcement of Zeke. Zeke, we've known he was going to be on the roster for a while now. First he was, rumored to them, then he was trialing, then they extended the trial, and then they extended the trial some more. And at that point, you're like, okay, when's the contract coming? G2 dragging their feet a little bit, but they do sign him. I enjoyed the signature, the signing video. G2 esports always keeping it going with the memes. What do we think of this one? I mean, we've talked about it. Any fresh perspective on this, or should we just be like yes and move on?
I think we could be like yes and move on.
Yeah.
All right, we're on to the next one. Enough of Zeke. We've talked about Zeke.
That's
It's
about
been
it.
done. We're going over.
If
to
I
NA.
may,
Yes.
if you want to have more information on like G2 and the plug, like I recently did a video with Strong and Anders talking about this roster and stuff. So if you want like a 30-minute deep dive into it, you can probably find that like by just googling me at this point. I don't know. Like I don't know how you find my stuff.
Go
to my Twitter and
Go
it'll
follow
be out
his
there.
Twitter. It's down below his face. You can see it at RyanCentral_. If you follow the Valorant scene and you don't follow his Twitter, you're making a mistake. Check out his new content. Check out the YouTube videos. You've been busy. I've seen it. And yeah, get the deep dive on Zeke and this G2 roster and what they're going to do. And we're going to move on to NA, where things are sad. Things are sad,
Sure.
folks. Moon Raccoons.
Like they aren't in EU.
Moon Raccoons are done.
Crab.
I mean, technically they're not dead, but Alexander left, Temperature left, Fiend left, and honestly, I think the other players are looking for opportunities as well. So the roster's effectively dead, which is such a bummer. Sam, you want to start us out here?
I was actually, I saw Rebo wrote a Twitlonger, and I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, but I did see there was a bit there about how those three players, or like the team itself, had tried so hard to stick together, despite a lot of them receiving individual offers. So they were trying to go for being picked up by an org.
Yep.
And eventually that stops being sustainable. And that's exactly what's happened here. I mean, it's been a few months now, and much to, I think, all of our dismay and confusion, they were never picked up by an org. And eventually you've got to realize as a team, as an individual, I suppose, like, this isn't working anymore. And they need to kind of forge their own path. And potentially, I guess, those three players might have finally caved to an offer. I don't really see the point in leaving a team unless you have somewhere better to go. Like, you don't necessarily want to float around as a free agent when you could be competing. So I would imagine they've had offers. But it is still quite sad. Moon Raccoons were an exceptional team. They were doing really well. They were on an upward trajectory, and it's just unfortunate that it was never spotted out by any organizations.
I will say, before I let Ryan have this, I'm just going to say quickly, the logic could be that if they've been turning down offers to play as a team, maybe people have stopped giving them offers because they've said, okay, Moon Raccoons are sticking together. So the way you change that narrative and you make it clear to people that, oh, you know what, I am taking individual offers now, is you leave the team. So that I suspect is their logic there. Ryan, you got any thoughts on this roster, Diane?
Yeah, I think that if this was a team that started to show up a couple of months ago, they would have a tier 1 org offer on the table. The issue is there's not many tier 1 orgs left that aren't in North America already at this point. There's a couple of, we keep mentioning stuff like Evil Geniuses and stuff, those kind of teams, but in all honesty, if they were getting involved into Valorant for at least 2021 and VCT stuff, I think they would have done that by now. So I think that the only offers that they would be getting would be those relatively smaller orgs that have a bit less skin in the game, E United, Ghost, those kind of things, which is fair to say that the offers that they would be giving their players wouldn't be satisfactory, not up to the standard of the Moon Raccoons players as a roster, right? Like that's the you could sort of say a similar thing for Summon. It's a similar kind of case where they are very much a strong, unsigned team that want to stay together. That's fine in Europe because you still have the Fanatics, the XLs, the OGs, those kind of organizations still yet to be involved. So there's plenty of chance for those teams to come a knocking. In North America, most of those orgs that want to get involved in Valorant are involved in Valorant and they already have a team. It's just getting individual players to swap in and out to build that roster. Nobody's starting afresh now, and that's probably why Moon Raccoons decided to part ways.
It's a bummer in timing as well, because I do think that the players have made a mistake, and I'm just gonna be honest about that. I think declining individual offers in the time that they did was a mistake, because now there is a lot less opportunity. There's still going to be some spots. We're going to talk about one that just opened up after this in Dignitas. There are still spots. There's still possibilities. And I think Alexander's definitely going to get signed. I will be shocked if he doesn't get signed. I think Temps probably gets signed as well. But we'll see. It's the kind of thing where they had a huge hype spike. You got to strike while the iron's hot. You got to strike when those offers are coming in. You got to make them happen. I recognize wanting to stick together and try and make the 5 work. But at a certain point, if an opportunity comes across the table that is good, you got to take it. You got to take it, guys. You got to think about your career. Yes, I know you've been playing with these guys for 3 months, but this is about building a career and building a brand for yourself. It's disappointing. I bought a Moon Raccoon shirt. Now the team's dead. Feel cheated.
It was your fault.
Feel cheated. It finally arrived. It disappeared for like a month where they just wouldn't give me any updates. Like the tracking didn't work.
Like the only thing I was gonna say is like certainly from watching and casting them from Nerd Street Gamers, they didn't look as good as they used to.
No, they fell off.
They really did not improve to the same levels of teams around them, and that's also a problem.
That was again like I think they had that updraft where they were really good and impressing in tournaments. They were the dark horse, and there was that moment to strike. And they kind of missed it and started going down. And then as soon as that happens, people are like, wait, was this a flash in the pan? So it hurts your chances of getting signed, especially as a full 5. True. Still, I'm sad. But let's talk about Dignitas. Let's talk about the next one. This is another sad thing for me because I'm a fan of this young gun as a player. Odorous out of Dignitas. He's been removed. Some context behind that. He had connection issues with his internet. His internet went out and they were forced to forfeit a game and start a game. And it was a whole thing in the Winter Champs this past weekend. But suffice it to say, they've decided to move on. I don't think it's because of the internet. I think it's just a decision that they've made. Inconsistency was an issue here. What do we think of this one? Ryan, start us out.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get the opportunity to see much Dignitas considering like a lot of games were happening at the same time, and he really just didn't seem to get that kind of form. Like I'm just sort of looking at the stats that I had out of the 15 Jet players, he was ranked within the bottom 3. Yeah. And you've got a lot of various teams in there. He did play a good amount of games, more so than most in some cases, but we just didn't really see the same level of impact that you would expect from a Jet player. I also do feel that to an extent, Jet upping is being moved away from a little bit, or at least you need to have much more of an all-round game. I think we saw that from players like Mummy, even Mitch, Shazam. All of them had really good games on the Jet, not only upping, but using the ultimates and having rifle rounds. Or some teams like LG, for example, didn't run a Jet at all because it wasn't needed. So I think when you put a lot of stock into having a good Jet upper, and people are moving away a little bit from that meta, and also that player isn't as good at that particular role that you're looking for, it's an obvious move, I think.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I always find the argument weird when you say, oh, we're looking at the stats for these 15 Jets who are probably of the best in the region, and so he's probably still better than like 98% of Jets out there, but it's not enough, right? Yeah. You've got to be at the level or higher, because as a team you want to be winning. You don't want to be in the bottom 3 of the top 15. You want to be up there. So it does make sense. And consistency is an important thing. If you're not getting the results that you need, then something's got to change. I also do hope it's not the connection thing. The one thing that did strike me was just the tweet. And like, so I study English and I study psychology. And so whenever I read anything, like there's just there's so many layers. And so when it starts with, we have decided to part ways with Odorous, I was like, man, did you word it that way on purpose? Was there something behind that? I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But most organizations try to make it seem like it was more amicable. We've mutually decided to part ways. And everybody kind of reads that and goes, all right, well, somebody decided, they're kind of done with this.
I appreciate that they're not gonna say that, right? Like, I hate when orgs do that, when they're like, it was a mutual decision, and the guy who got dropped is like, I found out this morning. What the hell, guys? It's like, no, shut up. Just say we cut him. Like, don't try and make it seem like you're boys with the guy. You just fired him from his job. It's just, I hate that.
Because he wasn't very good at his job. I mean, like, it's sad and it's always like nasty when this kind of thing happens to a player like that. But when it comes to the other the other 4 players on Dignitas, and also the previous players that were on that roster, it is the most obvious move. I think the players that they brought in, like Maka, is actually really good at the Silver, and he's really fulfilled that role. It is the only piece that needs to be fixed and is missing for Dignitas to maybe be a top 10 team. Look at Shanks. He is thriving over at NRG, and not only from that operating role, but the things that I mentioned when it just comes around to being an all-round jet player. Odorous not only has not shown that, but he hasn't really shown that many signs of improvement. And I think that it's a straightforward move for them to make, as sad as it is.
I don't think it was illogical. My personal attachment, I just like Jad. He's a good kid. But I've known him for a while now, but it's just, I think it's a perfectly reasonable move. I am curious. This is where I'm eyeballing the Moon Raccoons players, where I think they make very logical pickups here.
What, you reckon Fiend? I mean,
Fiend or
I'm trying to sort of think myself. Yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, like, to give context to someone like, again, it's based on average combat score. I've got it down as at the moment, but he's around Showtime, he's around Boostia from SSG, Tanaka from Sedated. If you're part of those orgs and those rosters, I don't think it matters as much if you're not necessarily showing true strength. I mean, to be honest, Odorous' stats compared to Shanks, just having a quick look, aren't that far behind. It's just a bit of a lower ADR and not as many kills per round, but it's the eye test, which I can't necessarily give him the benefit for, considering, again, I haven't necessarily watched Dig's games from this tournament, but from casting them in First Strike and seeing that he's roughly around the same level, that's a concern going into big tournaments happening soon.
I got to watch them play Sedated, and I did enjoy that matchup, and Dig actually played really well, but it's Sedated, like they should be beating Sedated every day of the week. No offense to Sedated, it's just the where the power rankings stack up at this point. But it is what it is in that regard. But we'll go ahead and move on here. We've got some more stuff to talk about. Actually, I had completely forgotten that it's happened this week. Really thought this had happened in a previous week, but I've seen someone just added to our outline here that T1 dropped Fraud, or Fraud left T1. That's a weird one.
That is really weird.
I'm just gonna read his tweet because it's very classic Fraud, and like, again, I think I have to give some context here from what I don't even know that much about Fraud, to be honest. I know enough, I think, to give some context. I can't even find his Twitter. What's the man Twitter?
Mr. Fraudy Fraud. I don't know.
It's definitely not that.
Can't find it right now. We'll do it later.
I always found Fraud very grating and divisive. I think that, I don't know if that's just him.
Really feel.
Like, it feels like, I don't know if it's just because he said something about Europe, but I think that's the tip. It felt very much like, I don't think, it's the same with Sliggy. Sliggy does this as well, where I feel like it's very easy to talk from a certain perspective if you're a top team and you're winning. But when you're not, it comes off as a bit holier than thou. And that's kind of how so for Sliggy's sake, it's, he wants the team to be super flexible and he wants to be able to play all of these different changes of rosters based on pick and bans that could potentially come. Yet Team Liquid at that time never played anything meta. So it's like, if you want Scream to play all of these agents, get him to play Jet, get him to play the AWP. Like, I don't understand why that's not like the 2 + 2 = 4 there. And I think for Fraud as well, it's just, again, Twitch clips that I've seen from him. I don't know him personally, but it always felt like it came from a perspective where T1 were a little bit of a better team than they were. And I think we know instances and examples of where T1 have just done some really dumb shit or not looked that good from a default executing point of phase. Like, I mean, the game that you casted against Envy, that split map from First Strike, Sam, was a cluster truck, if we're going to call it that. They did get better. They did get better as time went on. And I think for the UMG qualifiers and getting to the First Strike like main event, they did a super good job. But this is still very weird. And I think you're going to have to look at players like Dazed and other voices in the team that feel like they've kind of ushered him out a little bit. Which is why I mentioned the whole, like, he's got very much a strong set of opinions, which could be a problem.
I found the tweet. The tweet is, I'm just gonna read it because we're talking about psychology and language there, Sam. This one is this one's something to unpack. Officially looking for team, no longer with T1. Difference of ethics and opinions on how to run the team/org. Wish the players the best of luck. Interested in me as a coach in Valorant? Hit me up. Yada yada yada. Rest is very generic. Difference of ethics and opinions on how to run the team/org. What does that mean? I see Vancily in chat says the story behind all that is pretty deep, and if you can share, please share, because that
feel
is
free to leak to us. You know, we don't have to
I'll get it out. I'll get it
us.
out of him later. I'll just slap him silly into. My first instinct is that this is a team that's very much going down the Korean roots. With I've forgotten both his Valorant name and Sire player, but I've forgotten what he changed his name. Spider, that's it.
Spider, yeah.
Like, I feel like, considering the rules that you can have like 3 North American players and then 2 anywhere, that we might see Korean players coming in and maybe having a Korean coach. So ethics is a weird one. It makes it sound like, I don't know, like the players are trying to sell stuff on the black market or something, that they're doing something really like
the team was like,
and
throw
illegal.
a game.
But like, yeah, like opinions, sure. Ethics, like, Jesus Christ, what are you guys doing in that team if there's difference of ethics?
Fraud has had issues with organizations before and his viewpoints on the organizations and how they were treated, and he's been vocal about it before. Now, I'm not saying in the previous issues that like they weren't valid, because he comes from an era when esports was much more the Wild West, and a lot of shitty things happened to a lot of players, but this isn't him having an issue with a boss isn't a new thing. I'll put it that way. So I am very curious about what the background is on that. I am very curious about what the background is. But hopefully
someone who also
sometime.
used to have a lot of problems with bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And one day my dad looked at me and said, "You know, Sam, when this happens, you got to think, what's the common denominator?"
The expression I love is, if you go somewhere and it smells like shit, maybe it's just there. If you go everywhere and it smells like shit, check your shoes.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, seeing as we're all spouting knowledge, I was just gonna say chat shit, get hit, which seems to be like the way that Fraud is approaching this. So like that's what you learn from this podcast, really. And like, I don't know, I feel like this was coming from a mile away. I don't know if it's actually a good thing for T1. Once upon a time I did, because T1 just seemed to be going backwards in regards to how they had set play, similar to Gen G, I think, with how they're playing Valorant. And even the stuff where it's like, oh, apparently now Brex is playing Jet and so Skadoodle's playing Silver. Like, why? No wonder Fraud lost his mind if that's what they wanted to do. Because I think that they were on the right track with what they had at the moment, and then have just decided, no, screw it, we're just going to play something entirely different.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised if he just went, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
The thing is, where
stuck on the word ethics, but if it's just like normal internal team stuff, sure. But if, like, when I think ethics, I think things like player contracts, for example, you know, like if there's problems there, or if they're like pretending that, you know, 14-year-olds are actually 17 or whatever. Like, I'm not saying they are, but I'm saying it's like on that level. When you see the word ethics, you think like some serious breaches of shit. and it's probably just like, I don't know, normal internal bullshit.
It's a weird one. I'm very curious to hear his side of the story, which I'm guessing we'll get at some point, hopefully publicly, but who knows. We're gonna move on though, because we're, as always, way behind time, as we tend to be. Giants picked up most of X Prodigy plus Meadow. That's exciting. That was a while ago. I'm just gonna touch on this real quick. Someone want to give us the quick 5 on that, or not even 5, 1?
I mean, I think it's better than Air, but they played one tournament, lost it, and there was a lot of drama because they used an illegal. Oh no, they didn't use, but the team that played against them used an illegal killjoy. The typical what's his face? The 100 Thieves lamp killjoy lockdown.
Oh yeah, okay.
From Steel. They used that. They asked the admins. The admin said it was okay, and then they got disqualified after using it. So.
Oh,
yeah, whole big of a mess.
The admin said it in voice apparently, so there was no like
record
documentation to say that it actually happened.
And the guy didn't step up to say I did. Oh no, that's the worst.
Honestly,
that's the worst. Because then it's just he said, she said. There's one other thing. Okay, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just gonna say again, if you want to see like a full episode talking about that, we go into detail on that team too. The main thing is Pipson. I think Meadows a really good addition, but Pipson, similar to Bonka, is mechanically. He used to be insane, like the typical CIS Dimasic, Chihuahua levels of fragmental attitude. But now not so much. He got 6 frags across that best of 1, I think, and a lot of question marks on how well they can do. But if they hit the ground running, which they did in First Strike because they were the Prodigy August team, they could be top 5. But I'm not as sold on them as people like Anderson Strong are because of. Again, I get nervous when I see IGL Sovas that maybe not show up in the server because I think Sova's the most important position on the team.
Okay.
Giants needed a level up, and I think that this is a good team to do it with, the X Prodigy. But yeah, there's more to see at the moment. I am happy that Meadows found a new home though, so hopefully that works out.
Yes.
There's one other thing that I'm just gonna mention, then we're gonna go on. The Movistar Riders signed a new team. One of those players with Rapatriste. And then they cut him like a day later because they found out he was cheating. Woo! Cheaters never prosper, folks. Don't cheat.
Especially when GamerDoc's on the case.
send him to the Shadow Realm. Send him to the Shadow Realm. That's not a good look for Movistar though. Very embarrassing for Movistar.
I think even like the team, so they did the same thing as Giants of dropping their Spanish roster to make something more European and more accessible across the region. I thought they were going to go a bit bigger than they did, but like their roster's fine, other than obviously picking up a cheater. But considering everything that's happened, I think they've dealt with it pretty well, to give them a little bit of credit. But it's still, I'm not, as horrible as it sounds, I'm not going to waste my time paying too much attention to Movistar Riders through, you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of level of team.
Until
they could surprise. Yeah, exactly right.
It's a wait and see. But let's talk about the thing that we actually really wanted to talk about here. The Winter Champs. We talked about it a lot, broke it down last week. Holy cow, it delivered. I mean, all right, we're just going to talk about the finals right off the bat because what a series. That was one of the best series I've seen. So much fun. All right, just give some context. Luminosity against Sentinels. No one gave Luminosity a chance in hell in this matchup. Sentinels were the heavy favorites. Luminosity win the first 2 maps. Everyone's like, oh my god, Luminosity are gonna do it. Then Sentinels win 2 maps, and everyone's like, oh, it's all gonna be for naught. Luminosity close it out on the last map. I mean, that was amazing. It doesn't get better. You can't script that better. It was
That's the
awesome.
thing. Like, this has given you, now that we've got a bit more time with Icebox in the game, best of 5s in Valorant are amazing. Like, they're genuinely so much fun to watch. I'm sure they're very long, as Van Silly could attest to, but I think when you look at Counter-Strike best of 5s, they very much feel meaty because of all of the maps in the game, and there's a lot of nuance to knowing, certainly when there is 7 maps, that some maps get banned out of it. That's the only negative side of it, I suppose, is that Sentinels, who always ban out Bind, had to play Bind, and they didn't look very good playing on it. It does provide an opportunity for LG, and it really tests them across all of the different series. But at the end of the day, you need to be good on all of these various different maps, and we saw a great side to LG. I think we spoke about them last week on how amazing. 2 weeks ago when he announced Moose and Dre. that they could potentially do things, but the question around them was that level of consistency, because FIFA and Proto at times look like top 10 players in North America, but the key emphasis is at times. It was consistent, and that is a scary prospect going forward.
Thief was nuts. I was having so much fun watching him play. It was absolutely insane. I must say that the split map to me was pivotal. And I don't know if it's just because it was like 1 a.m. at the time and I was like half brain dead. But I remember watching this, and Luminosity were on defense first. And they streaked ahead. And I was watch partying with some friends, and they're like, Luminosity win this. And I'm like, whoa. Split is defend decided. Give it a minute. And we swapped sides. Luminosity won the first pistol round, and even I'm like going, oh boy. But yes, that's where Sentinels turned it around on their defense. They had such a solid defense. I will say, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that thought this, but Sentinels haven't looked that good.
You're not the only one.
In this tournament.
You're not the only one. Everyone thinks it.
I remember watching the first two maps like, what is this? It felt like there was no tempo, or the only tempo they had was just kind of run and gun and hope for the best. There were some moments where they had really good strategy is such a vague word, but when you watch what they were doing, you could see they had a really good idea of what they wanted to do, and they executed it really well. But for the most part, it just felt like monkeying in and hoping for the best. And I haven't seen them look that much in a disarray ever. It's looking really, really bad. I mean, they're still able to get into the grand final. I mean, they're still one of the top teams in the region. We cannot take that away from them. But this is something we've spoken about with them before, when TSM were kind of snapping at their heels. I'm talking 4 months ago, and about how top teams can become complacent and other teams will improve and catch up. The top teams will kind of stagnate and they'll get overtaken. Whereas with Sentinels, it doesn't even just feel like they're stagnating. It almost feels like their cockiness is causing them to regress.
Yeah.
And when you look at their Twitters, obviously, I mean, they're just like, oh, whatever, we're playing for the fans. I actually remember one of the tweets from one of the players. I don't remember who, but it specifically said something like, imagine thinking we don't play the game for the fans or something. I was like, what? They're trying so hard to make it seem like this is, being all nonchalant about it. But the fact is, they're slipping. They're not where they used to be. And with the challenger, with the circuit coming up right now, I'm worried for them. Yeah.
Sorry, I just got taken aback because this is weird. I think when I was mentioning about some big show just followed me on Twitter was the thing, and I was just kind of
Lucky.
like, okay,
I'm
humble
jealous.
brag. So I just
don't
kind of
even
want
think
to
that's a
touch on
humble
what you
brag. I
said
think
about.
that's just a brag.
So, I do feel like you're looking at Sentinels, and I will give them credit because I remember one of the things that was pointing out that across all 5 maps in the series, Sick played different agents. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he has been one of the pivotal players that has made this Sentinels roster click. And the maps that they won were the maps that Sick really worked, in some retrospect at least. I think that his play was poor up until that final game. I didn't see Ambox because we'd casted the quarterfinals and I crashed afterwards. And that was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. my time. So I didn't see that Ambox game. But after casting him against NRG, after casting him against their series with Envy, I was very much not impressed by Sinatra in some cases. He has the ability to just turn it on in a second, similar to Mixwell, like for G2 when it comes to just, they can have a really crap map and then they have one round where they clutch it and that wins them the game. There was that round with Sentinels where literally Sinatra jumps in like flights to stop the spike getting planted and still gets a 2k. But Sick, like, he tried to play a lot more Sky. It didn't work. A lot of people said the Sky wasn't good. Then you've got Crashies on Envy playing a really good Sky, so it wasn't that. It's a weird one. I think a lot of people looked at Zombs and were saying that they should drop him, considering he didn't perform very well. I thought that he was one of the best Omens across the tournament, in all honesty. I thought that he used his utility really well. You got to bear in mind that Omen has been nerfed, so it is going to be difficult to find a lot of impact on that role now in comparison to before. Dapper, whilst I think kept up to the level that we expect, was the first death way too many times. I think Shazam also got caught out a lot, but I am very nervous about this team going into Champions Tour because they did not look good. They looked like a tier 2 team in a tier 2
Yeah.
tournament, as bad as it sounds.
Interesting.
Agreed.
That to me is a possibly the hottest take here, because they still
But-
did beat.
Yeah, I mean, like Envy, they're going to be Envy until the cows come home because that's the result that they just always win. I think they're 8-0 now.
Yeah.
But
Jeez.
it's crazy how NRG beat them, and
Mhm.
NRG had some amazing progress in the tournament. Don't get me wrong, but I still expected them to go a little bit further. They did get knocked out by LG, who won the tournament, so there is that. But I don't know. I feel like this is the worst that we've seen Sentinels, and let's be honest, we have seen crumblings of a performance for quite
Yes.
some time now. We've had it blamed on seeding games and all that kind of stuff, and obviously First Strike is one that you can go, all right, fair enough with the circumstances around Shazam, but I'm surprised. It's not so much that they're getting worse. I think it's just they're playing from the same book that they have been for the last couple of months. Everybody else around them is improving at a dramatic rate. I don't know if LG are going to keep this from going into the future, but the fact that they can turn it on and beat a team like this should be terrifying for Sentinels, because there's half a dozen teams that can do the same thing that were in that tournament waiting to take them on. And NRG was one of the most successful ones.
I do want to say, first of all, silver lining for Sentinels. We remember there was a time where we were talking about TSM this way, where we were like, they've gotten complacent, like they're starting to lose their edge, they're starting to crumble. You can have that fire relit and be like, you know what, we've got to compete to be able to stay at the top. Hopefully that's what's going to happen, and we'll see them come back in for the Champions Tour and, you know, turn it back on. But we'll see. I do want to say, as much as we can talk about the doom and gloom of Sentinels, Luminosity. Holy cow, Luminosity. They played so well this tournament, and it wasn't just in that final. They played good games throughout, and they had a tough road to do it. They beat NRG, who you were talking about having beaten Sentinels as well in the quarters. They beat Equinox in the semis, and then they take a full 5-map series. That's the other thing. If it's a best of 3 and they win 2 maps hot fast, right, you could say, well, there's a little bit of a fluke. If it's a BO1, usually a fluke. Best of 5 across all 5 maps, that's consistent play. And that's so encouraging to me. And they almost won it in 3 is the other thing. They choked that 3rd map. They choked Split. They should not have lost Split, to be quite frank. So this team is super exciting to me.
Yeah. I need a quick interjection. A courier has just arrived with papers for my residency application, so
boy.
I need to be right back. So,
all right, we're going to go to the topic screens.
you know, be right back.
We'll just have Icebox. It's Ryan and I and Icebox to discuss this next one.
That seems it. I mean, again, like there were solid performances across the board. Players showed up. I think Moose overall wasn't a standout player for LG, it's safe to say, but especially some of the round. I remember the 1v2 that he fluffed on Split on that map. You know, that was one of the worst whiffs I've seen in a while. But he also had rounds very much on Ascent where he won the game based on how he used ultimates and utility and just generally played solid fundamental Valorant. And I think that's what this team... It's hard to be a team that has moments to shine, but when you can do it consistently through the tournament and also through the complexity tournament, you got to bear in mind too. They also beat the Demon that beat an Xset. They got hammered. The first game they had, they lost like 13-4, 13-3 to Xset again because they did in the complexity tournament. Then came through the lower bracket and beat them. And ever since then, it's just like they leveled up. They ascended to a new level. Again, like I said before, I don't know if this is necessarily going to be a team that can continue this form. I think it's a bit of an Andbox scenario that could potentially happen with them doing so well in the tournament and then gradually gliding along. Not necessarily going down. Bear in mind that Andbox came third in this tournament. But there's going to be a couple of results where you go, oh yeah, typical LG. That's how I feel about this team, at least.
Yeah, I can feel that. And I do want to say, I just want to take a quick moment to brag because I was the only one of the 3 of us who predicted Luminosity was going to make it out of groups. We all thought Xset was going to beat them. So I'll take
to be fair, it
there.
was Xset. And I mean, I did say that Xset do Xset things, and that is very much an Xset thing.
Yeah, to win the first and then lose in the lower.
Yeah.
It's fair. I think there were some other interesting things. I think NRG is definitely a team that's continuing to be on the rise, where we were kind of wondering whether they'd continue to take that next step. I think Champions Tour is going to be super interesting for them, just to paint a picture for us. Otherwise, concerning for Sentinels, Cloud9 was better than I thought they'd be. Let's talk about that with a Korean player playing on a bazillion ping. That was surprising. Obviously, they lost in the quarters to Nbox 2-1, but still, that was a much better Cloud9 blue team than I was expecting coming into the tournament.
Mm.
I
I
don't know.
What a
mean,
miss.
I feel like with Cloud9, we kind of said it with Tens leaving that there is a potential that they can sort of turn it around and restructure themselves. I thought Mitch was insane on the Jet. The fact that he was that good at being able to sort of fulfill that role was a really good look for him. Zeta, the 200 ping king, did a lot of the work. I mean, it's always going to be difficult when it comes to playing with that much ping, but I thought he did okay. I'm just curious what this team is going to do in the future because it still looks to me like a bit of a mess in regards to the roster that they have. And I would be shocked if they go with these 5 players in the future, especially with the rumors that Poise is maybe joining Cloud9 in some capacity. I feel like I could see Zeta going out and Poise coming in because of the whole ping issue, and obviously he can't come to the States at this point.
Can't he?
But I'm still refraining from really looking at Cloud9 and trying to judge where they're going to land because it really could go either way at this point.
It's very open.
Really, Tens has just left. They've just replaced him. We don't know. I mean, it might have been a couple of weeks, but like in the grand scheme of things, that's next to nothing. It's way too early. Again, you look at a team on paper and you go, "Oh, this looks really good," and then they run outside guild, and they just don't do as well as you'd hoped. So you really can't look at that just yet. I think if we're already seeing somewhat of an improvement, then that's a good sign. But again, pinch of salt and wait for the tour to start.
So that's going to wrap up our talk about Winter Champs. Just again, Luminosity, everyone involved with that. Well done. Well done.
Hell
I was
yeah.
in a couple of players' DMs just afterwards because these are guys that I've known for years now, and I've seen, beating their heads against the wall trying to break into Tier 1 CS, and now they're doing great things in Valorant. I'm so excited for them. But let's talk about the WSOE qualifiers, which I assume that's the World Series of Esports. I haven't actually been able to find that acronym. This bracket,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
it's a BO1 open bracket. Gotta say, we EU now, baby. This is an NA tournament running BO1s with no coverage for most of the games. It's double
Welcome
elim
to
at
my
least.
world.
But like, yeah, seriously, these sucks. I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. I just want to see the games. Like I DM'd one of the players at CNI White earlier today, and I don't know if I'll get a response, but I just want to watch the game, and I need to know if someone's streaming it. Like, I'll cast it if no one is, in the laziest manner possible, because I don't have that energy right now, but I just want to watch the game, right? Like, let's talk about Cloud9 White. They beat Renegades. They beat the hell out of Renegades. Mel had that pop-off clip that Slash tweeted. I mean, that's awesome. Sam, you want to start us here?
Hey, okay, so along with Guild, C9 is a team that I have been standing since I first saw them in the FTW tournament when they were still magical. They have been absolutely outstanding. Mel is one of the most phenomenal Sentinel players, able to pop off while still IGLing. We kind of talked about EU syndrome, where it's like the opposite, the IGL and everyone's just kind of, oh, it's okay, you're not doing well, you're telling everyone what to do. Mel, on the other hand, is like a proper sergeant general, right? She gets in there, she commands the troops, but she also shows them how it's done. She's incredible. Jazzykins, the 16-year-old prodigy, that whole team blows my mind on so many levels, and I've been really sad to see that they haven't been performing as well as they could. They picked up Dream fairly recently to coach them as well, so there was kind of a light at the end of the tunnel there, and finally that's starting to show, and it's starting to pay off, and with a ridiculously decisive win over Renegades. Now again, this comes back to more EU problems. The whole best of one thing, it makes it very difficult to really gauge what's going on in a match, but it's a good step in the right direction for the ladies, and I'm really hoping that they're going to carry on that trajectory, because I think there's a lot of potential there, and currently, as far as I know, they're the only female team with any real backing at the moment, so there's a lot for them to prove, not only for themselves, but just for, like, women in general. And when I say only team, I mean in Valorant, obviously.
I think Dignitas is but they're a weird team because they're competing in both Valorant
CS and Valorant,
CS at the same time.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is tricky,
Weird.
but that's what they're doing. Also, one other thing to note is that Jazzy actually did not play this tournament. Katie played in her place. So that's an interesting one. Ryan, thoughts?
I mean, I feel like when it comes to this as well, I'm very nervous for Renegades.
Yeah.
Like, this is a tournament that I literally only found out about because of that loss, and so there's not really too much information for me to go on. I mean, when you're looking at some of the other teams now within that event, if we have like a quick scout, so we've got teams still in there like Time In, so they were sort of involved. Cloud9 White are going to be playing Elysium. You've got Big Frames in there. You've got Complexity too. So there are various rosters spot up too. So this is a good run of form that Cloud9 White could go in and actually get to a really strong position, because this is still just the qualifiers. But then again, the main event is apparently just a semi-final and a grand
Four
final.
teams.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, 14.
so
Just-
Cloud9 need to win one more game and they get to the semi-final, which I think is a really good look.
Just a note on Jazzy. The reason she didn't play is because she has like a final, I'm assuming for, high school,
Oh,
which is
babies.
worth like 30% of her final mark.
She's
So,
a baby.
priorities. I respect it.
Oh yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so she's still around, but she just, putting a little bit more focus on that for the moment. The question I had, you mentioned Complexity is playing in this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
They got smacked around 13-9 by a team called Flow State. Who the hell are Flow State?
I
And
don't
where
know
did
where-
they get off slapping Complexity around?
Where-
The only name
where
on there I
is-
recognize is Denya, and I don't even know why I recognize that name. I happen to recognize it.
Where are you
I
seeing
don't know
them
who they are.
titled Flow State? I think they lost 13-9 to Balanced Esports.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too.
I'm
Unless
literally
that's the
seeing
same
them
team.
beating Complexity in WSOE 13-9 in the upper bracket round 1.
Okay, I think it's the same team. I think we just have a different name for them. Are you using VLR versus Spike? Is that what's going on here?
I use Liquipedia. What do you mean?
Are they listed as that on Wikipedia? For
They
this one, I'm pulling up Spike. They're listed as Balanced Esports and that. But yeah, it's the same roster.
It says that on VLR.gg as well. So,
Who knows?
in any case, I think
Anyway.
it goes
Not
to
a good
highlight, like with Renegades doing having a huge fall of grace from First Strike. It does highlight the impressiveness of what LG have been able to achieve in that time too. Like Complexity have dropped, Renegades have dropped. These teams that were sort of in and around the likes of BBG, Equinox, those real tier 2 teams. There's very much a clear direction that some of those teams are going in, both in an up and down trajectory.
Mhm.
And I think that Cloud9 White can benefit off of this by, being above the pack in retrospect to some of those other teams who should be very worried going into VCT at this point now.
I'm just gonna take a quick moment aside as well to do my plug for Katie as a player. Whether it's with Cloud9 White or a different roster, Katie deserves a shot. Been a big fan of Katie for a long time now. Very impressive player, mechanically very gifted in FPS. Haven't gotten to watch her too much in Valorant because she hasn't really competed in Valorant, and even this game wasn't streamed. The only reason we have that fantastic Mel Popoff clip, which if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's on Slasher's Twitter. You can find it very easily. Is because Roy, Mel's boyfriend, was streaming.
Funny.
And in the background, you could just hear Mel yelling after they beat Renegades, and it's amazing.
It's so good.
So if you haven't seen it, watch it. But Katie deserves a shot. I don't know whether it's with C9 White or whether it's with a different team. Obviously, you're not going to replace Jazzy because Jazzy's nuts
Jazzy, yeah.
and so young that she's only going to get better. Is the reality because she's a baby. But it's these teams are. I'm excited. I'm excited again. There was that whole period. There was that arc where we were like, yeah, Cloud9 White, hell yeah, and then, and now we're back to excitement here. We're back to excitement, and that's a good thing, I think, for the scene, for this team, and hopefully they make the event proper and we get to watch that, so we can actually watch the games, please. Why?
And that is actually being broadcast. I see there is broadcast talent. Esports Doug and Fallout, which is pretty
Who is
exciting.
Fallout? I don't know who that
What do you mean? What?
I know who
Fallout
Doug
is huge in Apex at the moment, so he does all of the ALGS stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could be wrong. Yeah, I think he came from PUBG, but I know he's been kind of like the BR adjacent area, but he's
Battle
like
Royales
full on
have
Apex now.
Never been my thing to watch, so that's understandable that I haven't heard of him. But I'm glad to know he's significant. But yeah, I mean, here's gonna be my plea: is if you're gonna put on a tournament, show the matches. I know this is technically a qualifier, so I don't really care, but like your tournament is only 4 games. 3 games? 3 games. So why wouldn't you show some of the lead up to that? I don't get it. It's weird.
I agree.
It's just a weird one. Let's see what else we got. What else we got before we got to wrap this up? So we were going to talk...
I don't think. Oh.
Yeah, I think we're about done. Challengers starts in a week. That's exciting. That's going to be cool.
Yeah.
Do we know what the...
Gamers!
Yeah, Nerd2 Gamers is doing the tournament. We talked about it before. It's awesome. The quality of production is just better here. Better. We know it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no disrespect to UMG, but I think that...
Disrespect to everybody.
Yeah, disrespect to everybody.
Unless Mike is producing, in which case...
Am I Mike producing? Oh,
yes,
yeah, no,
Mike.
it's bad.
Yeah,
I was going to
no,
say...
if you're producing, there's problems.
I don't have to be nice to any of these companies. No one's hiring me for Valorant gigs, so screw all of you. It's...
Get on Bok about that.
Yeah, I'm going to bug him.
Yeah.
I've been bugging him, but it's okay. I understand. There's a lot of good Valorant talent right now, and there aren't a lot of tournaments. So I'll just go back to my CS gigs, I guess. Cry gently into my pillow.
I'm gonna continue begging,
you've
that's
done.
all I know how to do.
You've done some good CS:GO gigs. To be fair, I saw you doing some stuff this week.
You know, they keeping me fed, feeding my army of rat children. But I think that is going to wrap up our show here as we get into another tangent. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We are hopefully going to have a lot to talk about next week with Challengers Tour kicking off, so there should be a lot going on. I suspect we're going to get a flurry of last-minute roster moves as well as teams panic and decide they need to make a change right before the big show. So there should be a lot to talk about. If you enjoyed the show, do follow Nerd Street Gamers here, obviously. Follow us all on Twitter. You can find our Twitter ads down below our faces. I'm going to be trying to probably broadcast some of the WSOE games, but I don't know if I can or if I do or if I just... I'm not sure that's going to happen. Check out Ryan's YouTube content. He's popping off with that. He's got a lot coming. It's content on content on content, so definitely check it out. I see
you're telling me.
Keith in the chat right now. Keith is now coaching Big Frames, I think, so go watch the Big Frames games. Hell yeah. Sam, you doing anything lately?
Nothing that I can talk about just yet.
That's the best kind.
Hopefully I can add challenges to that. Fingers crossed. Mark, if you're watching, please. We'll see what happens there. If not, I will definitely apply to be a community caster, so I'll be involved in that. But other than that, yeah, just keep an eye on my Twitter. Hopefully I'll be able to announce some stuff soon.
Hell yeah. So follow us all. We'll see you next week. Every week at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we go live for Press 4 to Defuse, your weekly source for Valorant esports news and discussion. See you next time. Bye, everybody. Goodbye.